Good evening, good evening. It is 5 o'clock on Wednesday, so it is time for Live at 5. So excuse the hat and the red nose. It is really quite chilly here still. And my teaching room has not been used particularly a lot at the moment, so it's really chilly out here. However, that does not change the fact that I have got information to share with you. Thank you so much for the questions that you have asked this week. I'm going to stay on for about half an hour and get through as many of the questions as I can. A couple of them are proper doozies though, so they might take a little bit of time to get through. So the first one was a really wonderful, chunky question, and it was, is it ever good to be on a CTG during labour and birth? Oh, what a good one to get our teeth into first thing this evening. So, first of all, what is a CTG? So it stands for cardio, I never remember saying, can never say it, cardiotocograph, there we go. It is continuous monitoring. And a lot of you will probably be familiar with the image. I'm just going to turn my screen around ever so quickly so that I can show you an image of what we mean by CTG, the continuous monitoring. So you can see the birthing person there is strapped up to a machine. She's got electrodes over her belly, and that feeds information into a machine. So you can see from that image a number of things right from, the get-go. The person is on their back. The woman or the mum or the birthing person is on their back. They're often quite still, immobile. So we know that those aren't great things for labour and birth, for the physiology of labour and birth. So we know that there could be issues there. Sometimes you can have monitoring, which is, as you can see, there's a machine right next to the bed, but there's also another sort of CTG where you have a centralised screen or bank of screens outside of the room. So whoever is the caregiver can be looking after a number of people at the same time by looking at their results on a screen. So if you're in one of those situations, you might not have an attendant with you as well. So there's all sorts of different things in there with that monitoring. Now, there is also another sort of monitoring that is available, which is wireless monitoring. So rather than all of those wires going from the mum or the birthing person to that the readout, it can be Wi-Fi. Hang on, let me stop my screen from going. So you can have wireless telemetry, it's sometimes called, and this can be utilised, which means that parents can still have mobility. Let me just show you an image of this very quickly. Let me just turn my screen around. So here we got a mum who is has got telemetry, the wireless monitoring on, so you can see that she can be upright, she could be mobile. In some cases, you can still access water. So, a number of different advantages there if that is the sort of monitoring that you're having during your labour and your birth. So we then think, okay, it's available. We're all familiar with these images. Is it actually useful? Is it beneficial? Well, I've done a lot of information fact-finding in the last couple of days to make sure that I've got good, up-to-date information for you. But there are loads and loads of randomised control trials, studies looking at the effectiveness of continuous monitoring. And almost all of them come back with the idea that actually it doesn't have beneficial outcomes for mum or for baby. And so lots of randomised control trials. What a randomised control trial is maybe you've got two groups of people. One group have got something, one group haven't got something. You can then look at the results and say that something probably had some sort of effect on the outcomes. It's seen as the gold standard of testing. And a number of randomized controlled trials have been done with continuous monitoring to try and make sure that, outcomes are improved after using this equipment. And virtually all of the studies show that it doesn't have beneficial outcomes. So there's loads of different studies, all the way from 2000 up to 2018, 2019, and even more of those as well. So there's lots and lots of information. Even one of the big studies, or one of the big investigations, was sort of piloted by a lawyer who was working in America and representing these trials in these lawsuits, and finding that the CTG results were kept on coming up and saying that they weren't beneficial. So he did some investigations into it as well. So a lot of the information, the World Health Organization says that it doesn't have beneficial outcomes. The studies don't show that it has beneficial outcomes. So for the vast majority of cases, why are we using it? Why is it there? So that's just a bit of background information. The question was, is it ever good to have CTG? And I think this is really useful. Now, it's quite tricky to find information about this, but I've been talking to a number of midwifery friends and friends working in the system or have worked in the system. And the only time that it keeps coming back that it can be useful is if you're having an induction of labour, particularly if you are using synthetic oxytocin. So for those of you who are not familiar with the process of induction of labour, there are a number of different steps or a number of different processes within an induction of labour. And one of those is to have a drip which has artificial or synthetic oxytocin, which increases your contractions, your surges, and works in the body in a similar way to our endogenous oxytocin. Now, I'll do a separate question about synthetic and endogenous oxytocin another time. But when you have the synthetic oxytocin as part of an induction of labour, that can have quite a significant effect on your contractions. And that in turn can have an effect on how your baby responds to that labour. And so in those cases, it can be useful to have that continuous monitoring to make sure that baby is responding well to the labour, to make sure that what's happening in your body as a mum or a birthing person and what's happening in the baby's body is actually within the realms of normal, and making sure that baby is responding in a good way, a beneficial way to that induction of labour. So yes, CTG can be useful. Now, the one thing that I really want to come to is the idea of informed consent, because a lot of the studies that have been done on CTG more recently have looked at where it hasn't been an informed decision, or the consent hasn't been there. It's been said to parents, you have to do this, or you have to do that, or this is what we're going to do. Now, a lot of that taps into what we talk about a lot in terms of informed consent. Now, in the UK, we have the law of consent that says that nothing can be done to us without our fully informed consent, and that consent must be given freely and without coercion. And the fully informed bit is often missed out. To make a fully informed decision, we need to know the benefits and risks of doing something. So in this case, having a CTG, and we need to know the benefits and risks of not doing that thing. So in this case, not having a CTG. Now, with all of that information, we can then make an informed decision about what is right for us. So if you are being offered CTG, so continuous monitoring during your labour, you need to be thinking, Is this in my best interest? Is this in my baby's best interest? What information do I need to find to make that informed decision? What are my benefits and risks of having this monitoring? What are my benefits and risks of not having this monitoring? What do I want to do with that? And then moving forward. So a lovely acronym that we use within lots and lots of birth preparation programs is the BRAINS acronym. So BRAINS, B and R, stand for benefits and risks. What are my benefits? What are my risks? Now, something that's really, really meaty and useful to remember when we're thinking about risk isn't uniform. It's not the same for everybody. So often the example that I use is crossing the road. So if I'm crossing the road on my own, I will risk assess in a particular way. If I'm crossing the road with all 3 of my children, I will risk assess in a different way because it's like herding cats. And if I am on one side of the road and my youngest is about to run into the road and there's a lorry coming, I'm going to risk assess in a completely different way. So risk isn't the same always. It is circumstantial. It is personal. The other example that I use is bungee jumping. I love bungee jumping. I look at the risk of something happening and I think, so what? And I go for it. Other people look at it and go, what are you on? I wouldn't ever do that. And that is the same as when you are presented with information concerning your pregnancy, your labour, your birth. They can give you stats and facts and figures, but one person might look at a 1 in 1,000 chance and go, no, not taking that chance. Another person could look at that information and go, yeah, but there's 999 chances that it won't happen. This is what I want to do. So when we're thinking about the BRAINS acronym, the benefits and risks, we really need to be thinking, what does that mean to me? And so we can think about it in a sort of a broader scope. So that's the benefits and the risks. Then we've got our A, which is alternatives. What are our alternatives? If you're being offered continuous monitoring, what are the alternatives? It could be that you could have, if there is extra monitoring and it's going to be beneficial, maybe having that intermittent auscultation, another load of mouthful words, where you've got that Doppler where they listen into the heartbeat, maybe more regularly. Maybe there are other ways that they can assess what's happening with you and your baby rather than having that constriction in that CTG situation. And what other alternatives are there? Then we've got the BRAI, intuition. What does your intuition say? What does your instinct say? And in labour, I would rely very heavily on what your gut says because everything in your body wants to protect you and your baby. So what does your gut instinct say? Now, if you're in pregnancy and you're looking, about this as a potential in the future, that I can also stand for information. Where can you find information? Now, there are brilliant resources around. Sarah Wickham is fantastic. If you go to sarahwickham.com, and I'll put all of the links as sort of little comments underneath, Sarah Wickham has got lots of information about continuous monitoring, about intermittent auscultation, all of those different things. You can go and have a look at those studies, all of those randomized control trials. There are loads of them. I condensed it all into a very short space of time, but you can go and have a look at those studies and see what it is that's come out time and time and time again about the benefits or risks of CTG so that you can make an informed decision. Sometimes when you're talking to people within our systems, you get this much information, whereas when you look a little bit further, you'll find that there's a lot more information out there. So Sarah Wickham is a great place to go to look for extra information. There's also Rachel Reed, Midwife Thinking, which is another great resource. AIMS has got good information. So if you're thinking about an induction of labour, there's a fantastic book that they've got that looks through all of the reasons that you might be offered an induction of labour, for instance, and thinking about benefits and risks of each of those. And it looks at the evidence that supports it. And Sarah Wickham as well has a lovely load of different books. I know this is the older version. I've got the new one on order, but it hasn't arrived yet. So again, what's right for me? Thinking about those benefits, those risks. So thinking about information gathering. So that's the BRAI. Then N. N stands for nothing. Sometimes, depending on circumstances, doing nothing is a really good choice. And that doesn't mean that we're anti-intervention. It doesn't mean that we're anti, medicalisation at all. Medicalisation has its place. It's a lifesaver. Woohoo! However, we do overuse medicalisation. We look at every pregnant person and we treat them as if they're going to be that 1 in 10 that needs help. And actually, sorry, that's from World Health Organization. They estimate that 1 in 10 people who are giving birth will need support during birth. That's not what we see in our maternity systems, but that's what they reckon. But we treat everybody like they're going to be that one, rather than looking at birth as a physiological event that sometimes needs help. And by doing that, we actually cause a lot of problems along the way. So nothing, sometimes just taking a pause, taking a breath, letting labour unfold in its own rhythm is a sensible choice in a lot of cases. So the nothing, and then S is smile, because when we smile, we release oxytocin. So taking your brains with you is a really sensible idea, whether you're talking about CTG, whether you're talking about induction of labour, whether you're talking about screening, whether you're talking about ultrasound scans, whether you're talking about vitamin K. Pretty much everything comes down to taking your brains with you. What are my benefits? What are my risks of doing something? What are my benefits? What are my risks of doing nothing? And that is going to be different for everybody. So it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So bringing it back to the original question, is it ever a good idea to be on a CTG during labour? Sometimes. What's right for you? What's happening in your birth? What is happening in your body and with your baby? Sometimes it can be a very sensible option. A lot of the time, if you've got a straightforward pregnancy, straightforward labour, straightforward birth, the evidence shows that there aren't that many benefits to it. It doesn't alter the outcomes. So if you are in a place where it is very much commonplace that everybody is put on a CTG, you want to start thinking why. Is it because it makes life easier for others? Is it because it's actually beneficial for me? Start thinking a little bit about those choices and options and think about what's going to benefit you. So that is the first question. If anybody's got any questions that have come back through from that, please feel free to pop them in the comments. Otherwise, I will move on to the second question. Okay, so the second question that I got sent through was another lovely chunky one, which was, let me see, where did I write it down? There we go. What are the pros and cons of water for labour and birth? So, again, it's not one size fits all. It's there's loads and loads of wonderful evidence out there that shows the benefits of water. And I'm just doing a quick search today to see what Sarah Wickham has been doing, because she loves to keep on top of information and research. There is a 2022 study that looked at water birth. And the wonderful thing about this study, if anybody wants to go and have a look at it, it's Burns et al. 2022. It was looking at water across lots of different places. So it looked at water in the obstetric unit, so in labour ward or delivery suite, whatever you call it in your area, but in the hospital, using water in the hospital as well as using it in the midwifery-led units, using it at home, and looking across the board. And they found so many benefits to birthing or labouring in water. And they looked at both labouring water and birthing in water as well. It showed that it reduced the desire for epidural or the need for epidural. It showed that there was a reduction in injected opioids, so things like pethidine and diamorphine. It reduced the number of episiotomies, which is the surgical cut of the perineal area that sometimes is used to give babies some more space to come out. It was a reduction in maternal pain. There was a reduction in postpartum hemorrhage, and what that is bleeding after your baby is born, and an increase in maternal satisfaction. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? So yay for water. It also showed that there were no differences in the APGAR scores. So when babies are born, they're assessed for a number of different things, and that is scored on an APGAR score. And it showed that after 5 minutes, the babies were the same, their scores were the same, whether they were born in water or out of water. So sometimes it's used as a reason for not using water, particularly in America. There's a lot of resistance to using water for labour and birth in America. And this is one of the things that's often used, babies are compromised. There are loads and loads of studies that have been done over the years, and all of them show similar things. So one of the other studies showed that there was a reduction in transfer rates. So if you're starting at a home or in a midwife-led unit, there was a reduction of transfer to a hospital. There was a reduction in caesareans, and a much more significantly more likely to have a straightforward physiological birth if you were in water. Another study found that if you're in water, you're much more likely to be in those upright positions that most of us are aware sort of expand the pelvic area for baby to come out. There was much more hands-off birth because you've got your own little sort of safety net around you, haven't you? You've got little what did they call it? A natural barrier. That was it. So if you're in your own little pool, you've got this natural barrier, so you've got far less hands-on approach. And also many more physiological third stage. So once the baby is born, the placenta coming away on its own without needing an injection to help it to be released. And again, this study showed a reduction in episiotomies, so that's surgical cut of the perineal area. Now, one thing that sometimes crops up is tearing, and there are so many different findings from different studies. Some studies found that if you're in water, it increased your likelihood of tearing. Other studies showed that if you're in water, it decreased your likelihood of tearing. So it's really tricky to find out. But I think one thing that did come out a lot over and over again was the reduction in the severity of the tears. So it tended to be that if there were tears, that they tended to be much more superficial, the sort of first degree and second degree. Now, obviously, the idea of tearing is not very pleasant for any of us, but actually it is quite a normal part of a lot of labours, that our bodies, they're designed to sort of accommodate our baby as it's moving out. And sometimes that just, separates a little bit. As you might be able to see, my lip has sort of split recently. And it's quite similar to that sort of sensation. So, another study showed fewer VEs, so vaginal examinations, and as I said, the natural barrier. So all of these fantastic things have been shown in study after study after study. And again, as Sarah Wickham says, we've got so much evidence to show that water can be really beneficial, but there's still a lot of resistance, particularly within obstetric units, to utilise this, and therefore more studies keep having to be had to sort of say, hey, look, this works, why don't we use it more? However, that said, it's totally up to you. Some people don't like being in water, and that's fine too. You don't have to use water. What I would say is, if you are thinking that you might like it, it's always better to get it set up and have it as an option. And I don't mean you have to go out and buy a pool or hire a pool, but you know, if you've got a bathtub, that's really lovely. If you've got a shower, water, access to water can be really lovely during labour. You don't necessarily need to give birth in it, but if you've got that access, then you can try it. And if you don't like it, you can get out again. Now, if you're lucky enough to be in one of the areas where you've got pools offered as part of your, maybe your home birth or your midwife-led care, or if you're in an obstetric unit where you've got the option for water, have it, because then it's there if you want it and you can get in, pardon me, and if you don't like it, you can get out again, and that's not a problem. Now, one thing that does come up when I'm teaching every now and again, somebody will come up with well, isn't there something that says that if you get into the pool too early, it'll slow everything down? There was a tiny little bit of evidence that showed that if you got into a pool before you were in established labour, now remember that there aren't really stages of labour. That's a human construct from when we were trying to measure what labour was. But if you get into a pool before you're in that established labour, that regular pattern of contractions, that it can slow everything down. Now, it was a very small study and it hasn't been replicated before. And if you think about it, a lot of people, if they are in labour and trundle off to a hospital and they're told that, you know, that it's too soon for them to be in that place, they tend to get told to go home and have a bath. So we know that for a lot of us, getting into a bath helps us to relax. If we relax, we release oxytocin, and oxytocin is the key hormone for labour and birth. That's what makes those surges really work. It's literally taken up by the muscles of the uterus to create those contractions. So oxytocin is key. So if you do find that, you know, you're in labour and you feel like you want to get in the water, and you get in the water and you find things slow down, you've got two choices. You can either enjoy the time that you're in the water, or you can get out and do something else. The key during labour is really to do what feels right for you, you know, listen to your body, listen to your baby, and do what feels right. If you get in the water and it feels horrible, get out. If you get in the water and it feels lovely and you fancy a snooze, fab, stay in there and have a snooze. Obviously, make sure that you're safe, but you know, you can relax and enjoy it and allow that oxytocin to flow. So it's totally up to you. And again, we can use that BRAINS acronym. You know, what are my benefits? What are my risks about water? What are my benefits and risks of not having water? What are my alternatives? What's my instinct? What if I do nothing? And smile. So, you know, really thinking about all of those choices and options that are right for you. Now, one thing that wasn't in that question, but I just want to touch on, is if you're in an area and you are told you can't have water for this, that, and that other reason, you know, you've gone past a certain date, or your BMI is blah-de-blah, or you've got this condition or that condition. Bring it down to those brains again, the benefits and the risks. Often when we're told we can't use water, the things that we're being offered as an alternative have got their own risks. So if we're told you can't have water, but you can have pethidine, okay, you can't let me in the water, but you will give me an opioid. Again, you know, thinking about what's my benefits, what's my risks, why can't I get in the water? Where's the evidence to support that I can't be in water because of this reason? And once you're given that information, you can look at it and then think, yeah, right, that's fair enough, or actually that doesn't make much sense at all. And you can talk about what it is that you want. Now, if you are pregnant and you're being told you can't have this, you can't have that, what I would highly recommend is finding out some more information. Now, if you're in the UK, chances are you can talk to a consultant midwife in your area. Most of the trusts in the UK do. I know that there are a few places where you haven't at the moment, but you can talk to the consultant midwife in your area, make an appointment with them, and talk through your choices and your options. Say, this is what I want. This is how I want it. And you can have that discussion. Now, the beauty of having that is that you can then create a plan together and have it documented. And that's a really important part for the systems to be able to, work smoothly, so you don't have to have a fight every time, so you don't have the same conversation every time. That documentation is really, really useful. If you find that you're not getting the support within your area, there are other places that you can get information from as well. There are some amazing independent midwives who you can have an hour consultation with, for instance, and you can talk through your choices and options with an independent midwife. You might have some doulas in your area who are knowledgeable about what your choices and options are as well. You can also, this is the sort of thing that we cover within our hypnobirthing courses. So if you fancy coming and learning some more about your choices, your options, book onto a hypnobirthing course, because it's not just about breathing. It's a tiny little part of your overall course, but it's mostly to do with your choices and your options and working out what is right for you and how to get what is right for you. So that is pretty much the question about water. Pros and cons, what are they? And again, there's some lovely resources out there as well. Sarah Wickham's got a great rundown of all of those studies. There's loads of them, and they're all around the world as well. So if you're watching and you're not from the UK, there's loads of fantastic studies being done pretty much everywhere in the world around about water at the moment. So, if you're talking to a caregiver and they say, yeah, but that's not relevant because that's a UK study, or that's not relevant because it's from here or there, they're pretty much being done everywhere at the moment. So go and check out Sarah Wickham. I'm not on commission, by the way. I just love Sarah Wickham. She's fantastic. Okay, so where are we for time? All right, we're nearly up at the half an hour point. So I'm just going to answer one more question, because this one comes through virtually every time I ask for questions anywhere. I get asked, when should we do a hypnobirthing class? And this is one of the number one. After, are you going to make me cluck like a chicken? After that question, this is the next one. When should we come? And it really is totally up to you. We are not, or I am not prescriptive. I don't care whether you've been to a 20-week scan or not. And I know that some courses don't want you until you've had that 20-week scan. If you have scans, that's fine. If you don't have scans, that's fine. But you come to a course when you are ready. Some people, they get in touch with me as soon as they know they're pregnant, because they're terrified. Absolutely terrified of being pregnant, of giving birth, the whole shebang. So we do the course straight away, because then they can enjoy their pregnancy. And they always do a top up sort of closer to their birth time, so that it's not like a million miles away since they've done the course. But that works for them. I have taught people all the way up to 39 plus 6. That's the latest that I've taught. But there is no too late either. There is plenty of time. Most people come between sort of 25 and 36 weeks, because that's the sort of time, in my experience, where people have suddenly gone, oh yeah, we're going to have a baby. All right, what do we do now? And then they rushedly book onto a course. So if you are in the mind that you want to meet other people who are at a similar sort of gestational stage of pregnancy, then that's a good time to come. But really, it's totally up to you. When do you want to come? It also really depends on what sort of learner you are. The hypnobirthing program, the hypno is hypnotherapy, and that takes a little bit of time and practice. excuse me. And so if you like to have your birthday as the sorry, just one moment please, caller. If you like to have your birthday as a goal that you can see and you're thinking, right, now I need to get practicing, maybe coming a little bit later on in your pregnancy is a good idea. If you're the sort of person that likes to just let everything settle in and have plenty of time to practice, maybe coming a little bit earlier. So really sorry that I can't give you a definitive answer. However, it really is, when is it right for you? That's when you need to book on. So those are the main questions that I'm going to answer today. If you've got any questions at all that you want me to answer immediately, put them in the chat really quickly. Otherwise, I will love you and leave you until this time next week, and we will come back and we will answer some more questions then. I hope you found it useful. Have a lovely evening, everybody, and see you soon. Bye.